A massive, sluggish dinosaur drags its tail through a murky swamp. Its limbs stick out like a lizard's, and its eyes are dull, lifeless. For anyone growing up in the 1950s or 60s, this was the dinosaur you knew from textbooks, documentaries, even movies like Fantasia or King Kong. But by the 90s, everything had changed. Dinosaurs were suddenly fast, fierce, and smart. They sprinted across the screen in Jurassic Park, hunted in coordinated packs, and looked more like terrifying birds than lumbering reptiles. What happened? This dramatic transformation wasn't just the work of Hollywood special effects, it was rooted in science. In this video, we revisit one of the most important turning points in paleontology, the Dinosaur Renaissance. It began quietly in the late 1960s, when a Yale paleontologist named John H. Ostrom made a discovery that would rewrite the story of dinosaurs and shake the scientific world. With the help of his passionate student Robert Bakker, Ostrom introduced a revolutionary idea. Dinosaurs weren't cold-blooded brutes, they were agile, warm-blooded, and deeply connected to birds. And it all started with one small fossil in Montana. Its name, Deinonychus. Before 1969, the scientific view of dinosaurs was largely shaped by 19th century fossils and early 20th century assumptions. Dinosaurs were seen as sluggish, cold-blooded reptiles, oversized lizards that lived in swamps and dragged their tails behind them. Museum displays often featured brontosauruses with their bellies nearly scraping the ground, and Rex posed awkwardly upright like a kangaroo. School books described dinosaurs as evolutionary failures too big, too dumb, and too slow to survive. Paleontologists of the time believed that dinosaurs became extinct because they couldn't adapt, outcompeted by smarter, smaller mammals. This image persisted for decades and was rarely questioned. It fit comfortably into the existing framework of reptiles, cold-blooded, solitary, and simple-minded. Even the word dinosaur came to mean something outdated and clumsy. For kids growing up in the 50s and 60s, dinosaurs weren't thrilling. They were dull monsters of the past. Scientists didn't study how they moved or behaved. They just described bones. But all of that was about to change. In 1969, a fossil dug up in Montana challenged every one of those assumptions. It wasn't massive, it wasn't sluggish, it wasn't dumb, and it didn't fit the mold of a lizard at all. It was called Deinonychus, and it moved like a killer. In the Badlands of Montana, John H. Ostrom and his team from Yale's Peabody Museum unearthed something unexpected, the fossilized remains of a small, two-legged predator, unlike anything in the books. It was about 3 meters long, with powerful legs, grasping hands, and a large sickle-shaped claw on each foot. Ostrom named it Deinonychus antirrhopus, meaning terrible claw with counterbalance. This dinosaur didn't match the traditional mold. Its skeletal structure suggested a fast, agile animal, built for speed and precision, not brute force. The most striking feature, a stiffened tail that likely acted as a dynamic balancing rod during running and jumping. Ostrom meticulously studied the bones and noted strong muscle attachments, hollow bones, and a bird-like pelvis. These weren't just coincidences. To Ostrom, it was clear this dinosaur was nothing like a lizard. It had more in common with birds. When he published his findings in 1969, they sent shockwaves through paleontology. Suddenly, the idea that dinosaurs might be active, intelligent, and warm-blooded was no longer science fiction. Deinonychus wasn't just a new species, it was a wake-up call. A forgotten lineage of dinosaurs may have survived, not through extinction, but through evolution into the birds flying above us today. Ostrom's research didn't stop at Deinonychus. He began comparing its bones to those of the early bird Archaeopteryx, discovered in Germany in the 1860s. The similarities were striking wishbone-like clavicles, 3-fingered hands, long tails, and similar limb proportions, Ostrom argued that these weren't superficial features, they pointed to a shared ancestry. In fact, Archaeopteryx looked more like a small dinosaur than a modern bird. He revived an old theory that had been largely dismissed. Birds didn't just resemble dinosaurs, they were dinosaurs. At the time, this was deeply controversial. The prevailing belief was that birds evolved from small, tree-dwelling reptiles, not ground-based predators like Deinonychus. Many in the scientific community rejected Ostrom's ideas, but the evidence kept piling up. The more researchers looked at theropod skeletons, the group of meat-eating dinosaurs that included Rex, the more bird-like traits they found. Ostrom had cracked open a door that couldn't be closed again. He wasn't just proposing a new species, he was reshaping the dinosaur family tree. This wasn't a footnote in paleontology, it was a paradigm shift. Dinosaurs weren't extinct. They were hiding in plain sight, perched on branches and singing in the trees. One of Ostrom's students, Robert Bakker, took his mentor's ideas and ran with them literally. Bakker became the public face of the Dinosaur Renaissance, with wild hair, cowboy boots, and an infectious passion. He wasn't just a scientist, he was a science communicator. Bakker championed the idea that dinosaurs were not cold-blooded reptiles, but warm-blooded, energetic, and highly adaptable animals. He argued that many dinosaurs had fast metabolisms and behaviors more in line with the birds or mammals than with lizards. In his now famous 1969 drawing of Deinonychus, the animal is shown leaping through the air with claws extended, dynamic, dangerous, and alive. This was no accident. Bakker's goal was to overthrow the old, slow reptile image. He published articles, gave lectures, and even appeared in TV documentaries, spreading the Renaissance to both academia and the public. His enthusiasm helped make dinosaurs exciting again. Museums began to update their exhibits. Teachers began rethinking how they taught evolution. Kids who once saw dinosaurs as boring became obsessed with their new, agile identities. Bakker didn't just interpret fossils, he inspired imaginations. He helped transform dinosaurs from fossils in a museum into living, breathing creatures that once ruled the earth and may still soar above us. In the late 1970s, another discovery challenged old assumptions, this time about dinosaur behavior. Paleontologist Jack Horner uncovered a nesting site in Montana filled with fossilized remains of a hadrosaur he named Maiasaura, meaning good mother lizard. What made the find extraordinary wasn't just the eggs, it was the evidence of post-hatching care. Fossils showed that the young stayed in the nest after hatching and grew rapidly, suggesting they were fed and cared for by their parents. This directly contradicted the idea that dinosaurs laid eggs and walked away, like many modern reptiles. Instead, it hinted at social behavior more like birds. Horner's work added a new layer to the Dinosaur Renaissance. Not only were some dinosaurs warm-blooded and bird-like in form, they might have also been bird-like in behavior. Nesting colonies, parental care, and possible herd behavior began to redefine how we thought about these ancient animals. It also changed how people felt about dinosaurs. They weren't just monsters or evolutionary oddities, they were complex, even nurturing. Dinosaurs started to feel familiar, and with every new dig, the line between reptile and bird blurred even more. The Renaissance wasn't just about science, it was about empathy. Another myth the Dinosaur Renaissance shattered was how dinosaurs stood and moved. For much of the 20th century, dinosaurs like Rex were shown standing upright with their tails dragging behind them. This tripod pose was based on early fossil reconstructions and outdated assumptions. But as paleontologists like Ostrom and Bakker studied skeletal mechanics more closely, they realized this posture was anatomically incorrect. The vertebrae and tail muscles of theropods suggested a horizontal body alignment. Dinosaurs held their tails off the ground to balance their forward-leaning bodies, much like modern birds. Their spines formed an S-curve, not a rigid straight line. These insights led to updated museum displays, more accurate reconstructions, and new biomechanical models. Suddenly, dinosaurs became sleek and agile, not lumbering behemoths. Kids growing up in the 80s and 90s saw a very different T-Rex than their parents had. The walking, tail-dragging beast of the past gave way to a lean, fast predator with its eyes forward and its center of mass shifted like a sprinter. It was a visual revolution that reinforced the scientific one. Dinosaurs were no longer evolutionary dead ends. They were dynamic creatures designed for movement and survival. In 1990, novelist Michael Crichton published Jurassic Park, a thriller deeply inspired by the ideas of Ostrom, Bakker, and Horner. 3 years later, Steven Spielberg turned it into a blockbuster film. Suddenly, millions of people around the world saw dinosaurs in a new light. The velociraptors of the movie, though actually based on Deinonychus, were fast, smart, and terrifying. T-Rex wasn't a sluggish brute, but a thunderous, sharp-eyed hunter. This wasn't just entertainment. It was science fiction rooted in real science. The film sparked a renewed global interest in dinosaurs. Museums saw record attendance. Kids wanted to become paleontologists. For adults, it was a moment of revelation. The dinosaurs they had learned about as children were wrong. The movie became a cultural bridge between generations, those who grew up with slow dinosaurs and those born into the Renaissance. It marked the mainstream arrival of the new dinosaur image. Thanks to years of scientific work, dinosaurs were no longer just bones. They were creatures of awe, movement, and intelligence. Jurassic Park didn't create the Dinosaur Renaissance. It was its grand unveiling. The impact of the Dinosaur Renaissance is still felt today. Scientific research has accelerated, using technologies like CT scans, isotopic analysis, and even fossilized melanosomes to study dinosaur color. Evidence continues to mount that many theropods had feathers. Some likely used them for display, warmth, or even gliding. The idea of feathered dinosaurs is now accepted, though it once sounded absurd. Dinosaurs are now understood not as evolutionary flukes, but as one of the most successful and diverse groups in Earth's history. The public has also changed. More people than ever are interested in paleontology, not just as a study of extinction, but as a window into how life adapts and evolves. The Renaissance made dinosaurs relatable. It gave them character, behavior, even emotions. It taught us that science isn't fixed. It evolves, just like the creatures it studies. And for those who grew up during this revolution, it's more than a scientific shift. It's a personal memory of wonder, returning to something once thought familiar. Dinosaurs didn't just come back to life, they changed ours, despite all we've learned. Dinosaurs still hold mysteries. Did they sing like birds? How complex were their social structures? Could some species have been smarter than we thought? The Dinosaur Renaissance opened the door, but the journey continues. Scientists today are still digging, scanning, and revising. That's the beauty of science, it never stands still. And for viewers over 40, there's something poetic about watching the story unfold. You remember when dinosaurs were swamp dwellers? You witnessed their rebirth as agile hunters. Now, you're part of a new chapter, one where technology, fossils, and curiosity blend to reveal ancient truths.